I found out about the layoff the same way I found out about most things at that company. Not from leadership, not from HR, but from a system notification that hit my inbox like a cold drop of water. Ticket reassigned, owner updated, due date unchanged. And there it was, sitting in the tracker like it didn't understand what just happened. A compliance obligation tied to our biggest retail client, a hard deadline, a contract clause with liquidated damages, $1,200,000. By 10 in the morning, they'd cut headcount. By lunch, they'd locked dozens of accounts. By mid-afternoon, half my project owners were gone. But the obligation stayed, and somehow it was still assigned to me. I didn't panic. I didn't run around asking questions like a cartoon character. I did what you learn to do when you've been in corporate long enough to know how blame gets manufactured. I opened the audit trail, because when a company makes a decision that puts a live grenade on your desk, the next thing they do is ask why you didn't throw yourself on it. Northbridge wasn't a household name. Mid-sized fintech, payment processing. The kind of company that lived in conference rooms and spreadsheets and alignment calls that never aligned anything. I'd been there 7 years, long enough to see the cycles. A growth year where leadership talked about investing in people. A flat year where they talked about operational rigor. A down year where they talked about right sizing. Same words, different victims. My job sat in the least glamorous corner of the company. Compliance operations. I didn't build product. I didn't sell. I didn't get applause at all hands meetings. I made sure we didn't get wrecked. That meant contracts, control evidence, audit coordination, incident reporting, vendor risk questionnaires. The stuff everyone ignores until a client lawyer circles one sentence and says, "Explain this." The client in question was Harbor Mart, national chain, massive footprint, not our biggest revenue line, our biggest leverage line. If Harbor Mart left, other clients would review their options. Investors would get nervous. The board would start asking questions that make executives break out in that very specific kind of sweat. Harbor Mart's contract had a clause I'd been warning leadership about since the day we signed it. A yearly assurance package due by a hard date. Control testing, audit sign-off, security evidence, incident summaries, third-party attestations. And if we missed the deadline or submitted a package that wasn't complete, Harbor Mart could hit us with liquidated damages. No negotiation, no debate. No, we'll make it right. $1,200,000. Most people heard that number and thought, the company will handle it. I heard that number and thought, they're going to look for one person to pin it on. So months earlier, I built a timeline like it was a bridge. Owners for each evidence stream, security, internal audit, IT ops, legal, finance, milestones, reminders, weekly check-ins. I wasn't doing it to be annoying. I was doing it because the easiest way to ruin someone's career is to make a deadline feel shared until it's suddenly personal. December rolled in and everything got messy. Kara, our chief operating officer, started canceling my readiness meetings with a one-line response. "We're slammed. Move it." Daryl, the chief financial officer, gave me the kind of advice that sounds practical until you realize what it's really saying. "We don't need perfection," he told me, leaning back in his chair like he was handing out wisdom. "We need delivery." I remember nodding politely while my brain did the math. Delivery of what? A document set that legally commits us, with missing evidence, under a penalty clause. That wasn't delivery. That was liability. Then came the layoff morning. I walked in and felt it before I saw it. No chatter, no coffee smell, no clacking keyboards. Just that empty hum offices have when people aren't there, but the lights still are. There were dark monitors in pods that had been full the week before. A jacket hanging on a chair like someone would come back for it. A half-empty water bottle. A little plant someone clearly cared about. Then the HR email landed. Difficult decisions. Focused on the future. Thank you for your resilience. I didn't read the whole thing. I never do. Those emails aren't written for employees. They're written for lawsuits. I checked my calendar. The Harbor Mart readiness meeting for that afternoon. Gone. Not declined, not moved, just deleted. That's when my inbox started popping. Ticket system notifications, access revocations, user deactivated. Ownership transferred. I opened the Harbor Mart project board. Every supporting task under the main obligation had been reassigned to unassigned or marked blocked. The names attached, people I'd been working with for months, were no longer clickable because they no longer existed in our system. But the parent obligation remained, bright and clean as ever. Harbor Mart Assurance Package. Owner, Ethan. Due date, unchanged. I stared at it for a long moment, waiting for the anger to hit. It didn't. What hit was something colder, because I understood the shape of the problem immediately. They had cut the people who produced the evidence. They had left the obligation alive, and they had left one name attached to it. Mine. I walked to Kara's office. She was on a video call, smiling, headset on, looking like she was selling calm to whoever was on the other side. When she saw me in the doorway, she muted with one finger. Ethan, not now. It is now, I said. Harbor Mart's evidence owners are gone. The deadline is still real. She tilted her head like I was a child who'd found a spider. We'll rebalance. Stop catastrophizing. I'm not catastrophizing, I said. I'm looking at the contract clause. Her smile hardened. We're not paying penalties. We'll get it done. With who? I asked. Internal audit is down. Security lost their analyst. Vendor risk is missing their lead. We can't certify what we can't prove. She unmuted again and the smile returned instantly. Ethan, we're handling it. Focus on what you can control. I went back to my desk with a strange clarity. Because focus on what you can control is the sentence people use when they're about to ask you to take responsibility for what you can't. I opened a blank email. Subject line, Harbor Mart Assurance Delivery Risk. I wrote it clean. No emotion, no accusations, just facts. Staffing reductions removed key evidence owners. Contract requires complete package by specific date. Penalty exposure, $1,200,000. Current gaps, audit sign-off, security evidence set, vendor risk, questionnaires, request, written plan, and executive direction. I copied Kara. I copied Daryl. I copied legal. I copied security leadership and our account manager. Then I hit send. 5 minutes later, Daryl replied, one line. Understood. Proceed with submission. We will handle gaps internally. I read it twice. Handle gaps internally. That meant submit anyway. That meant certify anyway. That meant if Harbor Mart pushes back, they'll say I didn't manage my work. I didn't respond with anger. I responded with a question that forced a name into the record. Please clarify which executive is authorizing submission with identified gaps. I cannot certify completeness without supporting materials. I stared at the screen after I sent it, not because I was brave, because I knew what came next. When you put a decision in writing that leadership wants to keep blurry, they don't argue with you on email. They schedule a meeting. And about an hour later, my phone rang. Yeah, HR. Soft voice. Professional warmth. Ethan, can you come by at 3? Quick check-in. I looked back at the Harbor Mart obligation on my screen. Owner, me. Due date, unchanged. Penalty, real. And in that moment, I understood something I hadn't wanted to believe. The layoff wasn't the dangerous part. The dangerous part was what they were about to try to make me sign. At 3 o'clock, HR didn't meet me alone. That was the first sign this wasn't a check-in. It was a setup. I walked into the small conference room by the elevators, the one with frosted glass and the fake plant that always leaned like it had given up. And Kara was already there. HR sat beside her with a notepad open, pen ready, wearing the careful expression people use when they want to sound compassionate while they do something that isn't. Daryl wasn't in the room, but I could feel his fingerprints on it. This had finance written all over it. Clean language, dirty intent. Ethan, HR began, We wanted to make sure you're doing okay after today's announcement. I nodded once. I'm focused on Harbor Mart. Kara gave me that thin smile again. Of course you are. HR slid a single sheet of paper across the table like it was harmless. We just need you to sign an acknowledgement, she said. It's standard. I didn't touch it. I read it where it lay. The headline sounded benign. Assurance delivery. Responsibility, acknowledgement. But the body language told the truth. It said, I agreed the assurance package would be submitted on time and complete, and that I was the responsible owner for ensuring the required evidence was obtained, validated, and delivered. A year ago, I might have signed it without thinking, not because I was careless, because I used to believe team meant something, that someone up the chain would act in good faith. But after that morning, after watching half the evidence owners vanish and the obligation remain assigned to my name, I understood exactly what this paper was. A liability funnel. A way to take a corporate failure and compress it into one person's signature. I looked up. This isn't accurate. HR blinked. It's just confirming your role. It says I'm responsible for completeness, I said. We removed the people who produce half the evidence. I can coordinate. I can't fabricate audit sign-off and security artifacts. Kara leaned forward, elbows on the table, eyes steady. Ethan, no one is asking you to fabricate anything. Don't be dramatic. I kept my voice level. Then you don't need me to sign a statement that makes it my responsibility. HR tried to soften the moment. We're all under pressure. This just keeps things clear. No, I said. It keeps me clear. Everyone else stays blurry. Kara's smile cracked for a split second. So what do you want? I'd spent years learning that in corporate, if you say no without offering a path, they label you difficult. If you offer a path, you force them to choose between ethics and convenience. I want executive direction in writing, I said. If leadership wants to submit with gaps, an executive needs to accept that risk. And I want legal to confirm the contract interpretation. HR's pen stopped moving. Kara's eyes hardened. You're escalating. I'm documenting, I said. Those are different. Kara exhaled like I was exhausting her. Fine. We'll involve legal. Then she stood, ending the meeting by standing, because that's how people like her do it. As I got up, HR added, Let's keep this collaborative, Ethan. I looked at her. Collaboration requires honesty. I left the room and walked back to my desk without rushing, without a scene. The office felt hollow in a new way now, like it wasn't just missing people, it was missing restraint. And as I sat down, my phone buzzed with a message from Kara. Don't send any more emails about this. It's causing noise. Noise. That was the word executives used when the truth started traveling faster than their story. I didn't respond. I opened our ticketing system and clicked into the Harbor Mart obligation. In our company, we used a platform that logged every chain. Most people treated it like a checklist. I treated it like a courtroom transcript. I pulled the activity log. I saw it immediately. Timestamps, edits, reassignments, dozens of them that morning, all clustering around the layoff window. Owners removed. Due dates reconfirmed. Notes deleted. Statuses changed from at risk to on track, without any new evidence added. Someone was already trying to sanitize the record, and it wasn't subtle. I exported the full audit trail for the Harbor Mart project. Every task, every comment, every attachment, every reassignment. Then I saved it to a secure folder with a date stamp. I did the same with my email thread. I created a dedicated folder and dragged in everything. My risk memo, Daryl's handle gaps internally, HR's calendar invite, prior readiness notes. Then I wrote a private memo for myself, nothing emotional, no adjectives, just facts, date, time. Who was present? What was requested? What I refused. It felt paranoid. It also felt necessary. Because I'd seen this play out before. Not at this scale, not with this number attached. But the pattern was familiar. When leadership makes a decision that creates damage, they don't ask who made the decision. They ask who was closest to the damage when it happened. That night I went home and tried to be normal, tried to eat dinner, tried to talk about anything that wasn't a $1,200,000 contract clause. But my brain kept returning to one question. Why were they pushing me to sign a responsibility, acknowledgement, instead of assigning resources? Because resources cost money. Signatures are free. The next morning, Legao replied to my email thread, short, clinical, cold. They confirmed the contract clause was enforceable. They confirmed the deadline was hard. They confirmed missing or incomplete submission gave HarborMart the right to impose liquidated damages. In other words, the cliff was real. I forwarded Leakeel's confirmation to Kara and Daryl with one sentence. Please confirm whether leadership is directing submission without full evidence and accepting contract exposure. No one replied. Instead, an hour later, Kara pinged me directly on chat. Stop putting executives on the spot. Just do your job. I stared at that message for a long time, because it wasn't about my job. It was about their comfort. And I realized something that made my stomach turn, not from fear, from clarity. They didn't want me to solve the problem. They wanted me to absorb it. Then late afternoon, Daryl's assistant sent me a calendar invite. Subject, HarborMart delivery alignment. Attendees, Daryl, Kara, HR, legal time, tomorrow 8 a.m. 8 a.m. meant one thing. They were going to try to settle it before the day could create witnesses. I sat back in my chair, opened the HarborMart folder again, and reviewed the evidence I'd saved, because I knew what they would do in that meeting. They would frame it as me being emotional. They would frame it as me being rigid. They would frame it as me not being a team player. And if I didn't walk in with facts that could survive daylight, they would walk out with a story that could survive scrutiny. That evening, I made one decision. I wasn't going to win by arguing. I was going to win by making the truth too expensive to ignore. And I didn't know it yet, but that decision would cost them everything. The meeting was scheduled for 8 in the morning for a reason. At Northbridge, anything before 9 was designed to happen before the office filled up, before side conversations, before witnesses, before anyone could casually ask, "Wait, why are we doing this?" I walked in with a notebook and a calm face. Not because I felt calm, but because I'd learned something the hard way over the years. If you show emotion in the room, they use it as proof you're irrational. If you show control, they have to deal with your words. Daryl was already seated at the head of the table, hands folded like he was about to deliver a sermon. Kara sat to his right, HR to his left, legal joined by video, camera on, expression unreadable. Daryl opened with a rehearsed sigh. "Ethan, we need to get aligned. HarborMart is not just a client. It's a signal to the market." I nodded once. "Agreed. That's why accuracy matters." Kara jumped in immediately. "What doesn't matter is internal panic emails." "I didn't send panic," I said. "I sent risk." Daryl held up a hand like he was calming children. "We're not here to litigate tone. We're here to solve." Then he slid a packet across the table. "Here's the attestation HarborMart needs for the extension pathway. We're going to send this today." I opened it and read the first page. It wasn't an extension request. It was a clean, confident statement that everything had been validated, tested, reviewed, and confirmed. It claimed internal audit had completed control testing. It claimed security evidence was complete. It claimed there were no material gaps, which would have been impressive if it were true. I looked up. "This says the evidence set is complete." Daryl's voice stayed smooth. "It's an attestation. It's standard language." "It's not standard if it's false," I said. Kara's jaw tightened. "No one said false." I tapped the document. "Internal audit sign-off isn't in the packet because internal audit no longer has the staff to finish. Security's evidence set is missing artifacts because the assigned analyst was laid off. Vendor risk questionnaires are incomplete because the owner was cut. These are facts." Legal shifted slightly on screen. "We have not approved this final language." Daryl didn't even look at them. He looked at me. Ethan, you're the process owner. You sign, we submit, we move on. I didn't touch the signature page. I'm not an executive, I said. If Harbor Mart wants an executive attestation, an executive signs it. Daryl smiled in a way that wasn't friendly. Functionally, you are. In this lane. No, I said. Functionally, I'm the person you want holding the risk, while leadership stays clean. HR tried to soften it. Ethan, no one is trying to make you a scapegoat. I kept my eyes on Daryl. Then remove the part where I'm asked to certify things I can't verify. Daryl's voice sharpened, just a little. You're being rigid. I'm being accurate, I said, and accuracy is what keeps us out of court. There was a pause, small but heavy. Then Kara leaned forward. Harbor Mart won't enforce the penalty. They need us. I stared at her, genuinely surprised, because that sentence wasn't confidence. That sentence was guessing. And for the first time, I saw the full shape of what was happening. They didn't have a plan. They had a narrative. Daryl spoke again, slower now. Here's what's going to happen. We'll send the attestation, get the extension, and then we'll clean up the evidence. Harbor Mart wants reassurance, not paperwork. Reassurance is paperwork, I said. That's literally what this is. His eyes hardened. Do you want to keep your job, Ethan? The room went very quiet. Even HR stopped pretending to write notes. I felt the impulse to defend myself, to explain that I was trying to protect the company, to list the work I'd done, the nights I'd stayed late, the weekends I'd given up. Then I realized something, clean and final. None of that mattered to them. All that mattered was whether I would make the risk disappear on paper. I heard my own voice before I fully decided to speak. I want to keep my integrity. My job is optional. Kara's face changed like she'd just watched a door close. Daryl's tone turned colder. So you're refusing? I'm refusing to sign false statements, I said. If legal drafts accurate language and an executive signs it, I will support the plan and deliver what's real. Legal finally spoke with more force. We cannot send this draft as written. Daryl's eyes flicked to the screen for the first time. Then rewrite it. Legal's response was immediate. We will, and it will reflect current gaps and a completion plan. Daryl stared at me again. And if Harbor Mart pushes back because you exposed weakness, that's on you. That was the moment the last piece clicked into place. They weren't afraid of the penalty. They were afraid of accountability. I collected the packet, closed it, and slid it back toward him. If it's on me, then I need you to put your direction in writing. His lips thinned. We'll handle it. I stood, then handle it without my signature. I walked out before anyone could turn it into a debate. Because debates create ambiguity, and ambiguity is where people bury you. Back at my desk, I didn't pace. I didn't vent to coworkers. I didn't fire off angry messages. I did 3 deliberate things. First, I emailed legal and asked them to confirm, in writing, that the original draft was not approved and that any client-facing attestation required their review. Second, I updated the Harbor Mart completion plan with brutal realism, actual staffing, actual timelines, actual dependencies, not what leadership wanted, what the work allowed. Third, I opened our ethics and compliance portal. Most employees didn't even know we had one. It was run by a third-party vendor. Reports went to the General Counsel and the Audit Committee's designated inbox. Not HR, not the executives who were being reported. I filed a factual report. No drama. No accusations, just a timeline, contractual obligation and penalty exposure, layoff impact on evidence owners, pressure to sign or submit language asserting completion without supporting materials. Request for audit committee oversight to mitigate legal and client risk. When I hit submit, I felt something I didn't expect. Relief, not victory, not satisfaction. Relief that the truth was no longer trapped inside my head in a deleted calendar invite. That night, I stopped being the hero. I stopped believing loyalty would protect me, and I started treating this like what it was, A governance problem with a human cost. The next morning, legal replied to my email thread, "Do not send the prior draft. We are rewriting. All communications to Harbor Mart must be reviewed by legal." I read it twice and exhaled. A boundary had been drawn. But boundaries don't hold unless someone enforces them. I looked at my phone, thinking maybe that would be the end of it. It wasn't. Because minutes later, a new email arrived, this time from the audit committee chair's assistant. "Please join a call today at 4. Topic: Harbor Mart assurance and recent escalation." 4 o'clock meant the room would be full. 4 o'clock meant eyes would be on the facts. But that was just the beginning. And as I stared at the invite, one thought kept repeating in my head. Quiet, steady, almost calm. They thought they could pressure me in a small room. Now the room was about to get a lot bigger. The audit committee call wasn't optional. At Northbridge, there were two kinds of meetings: the ones executives scheduled and the ones governance scheduled. The first kind could be rescheduled. The second kind changed careers. At 4 o'clock, I joined the video call from a small conference room, so my team wouldn't have to watch my face while people in suits decided what my life would look like. When the screen loaded, I saw the audit committee chair first, Marianne, late 50s, calm voice, the kind of person who didn't waste words because she'd already seen what happens when people do. General counsel was there, someone from internal audit, someone from security leadership, Kara, Daryl, and HR, sitting a little too still, like they wanted to be present without being responsible. Marianne didn't do introductions. She didn't ask how everyone was doing. She opened with a sentence that cut straight through the room. "I received a hotline report regarding pressure to submit an inaccurate attestation to Harbor Mart." No pause, no softness, just the truth, in a room full of people who had been trying to keep it blurry. Daryl smiled, small, controlled. We're aligned on transparency. There was a misunderstanding about draft language." Marianne's eyes didn't change. "Then clarify it." Legal spoke first. "We reviewed the draft presented this morning. We did not approve it. It contained assertions we could not support with evidence. We instructed that it not be sent." Security leadership added, tired and blunt. "We cannot certify controls we have not tested. We lost staff in the reduction. We are prioritizing Harbor Mart, but the evidence set is incomplete right now." Internal audit nodded once. Same for audit sign-off. "We're behind because the owner of the testing workstream was included in the reduction." Kara jumped in, trying to sound reasonable. "We're addressing resourcing. We just need alignment in communications. Ethan escalated externally without executive review." Every head turned slightly toward me. I kept my tone level. "I requested an extension pathway through the designated Harbor Mart liaison. I copied legal and the account manager. I did not commit to any statements of completion. I asked for process guidance to avoid a penalty." Marianne looked at me. "Did you sign any attestation?" "No," I said. "I was asked to sign language asserting completeness. I refused." There was a quiet beat. Then Daryl said, "We asked for cooperation. Refusal created unnecessary friction." Marianne's voice stayed calm, but the temperature dropped. "Cooperation with what, exactly?" Daryl adjusted his posture. "A standard executive attestation to secure an extension." Marianne turned to legal. "Was it standard?" Legal didn't hesitate. "It was not accurate as written." That was the first small collapse. Because once legal says not accurate on a recorded governance call, you can't rebrand it as a tone anymore. Daryl tried anyway. "We were going to refine it." Ethan made it adversarial. I watched his eyes, the way he kept scanning for angles, like he was still in a room he controlled. Marianne didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. "I'm less concerned about adversarial," she said, "and more concerned about whether any employee was pressured to misrepresent controls to a client under a penalty clause." Silence. Then Kara spoke, too quickly. "No one pressured anyone." I didn't argue with her. I simply said, I have the document and the meeting notes. The general counsel leaned forward on camera. Ethan, do you have the draft that was presented and the request for signature? Yes, I said, saved with timestamps. Daryl's face changed, just a fraction, a micro moment of anger that he shoved back down. Marianne nodded once. Send it to counsel after this call. Daryl tried to recover with charm. We all want the same outcome. Harbor Mart is critical. Let's not overreact to internal process debates. Marianne's eyes narrowed slightly. This is not a process debate. This is governance. Then she turned to Kara. Kara, what is your resourcing plan to complete Harbor Mart's evidence set under the extension pathway? Kara blinked, caught without a rehearsed answer. We're reallocating. Marianne waited. From where? Who is responsible? What is the timeline? Kara glanced at Daryl, then back to camera. We'll finalize owners by tomorrow. Marianne's voice stayed flat. That's unacceptable. You will finalize owners on this call. The air in the room turned heavy. Not because anyone yelled, because someone finally refused to let things be vague. Kara swallowed. Security lads can take the evidence stream. Internal audit cut in. We can only commit to partial testing by the revised date unless we get contractor support. Marianne turned to Daryl. Approve contractor support. Daryl's smile twitched. We'll evaluate budget. Marianne didn't blink. Evaluate is not approve. The general counsel said, given penalty exposure, we recommend immediate support. Daryl stared for a long second, then nodded once. Approved. That was the second collapse. Because he didn't approve it because it was right. He approved it because he couldn't afford to be the person on record, refusing support while the penalty number hovered over the call like a ceiling fan. Marianne continued. Next, client communication. Legal will draft an accurate executive attestation. It will reflect current gaps and include a completion plan. The signature will be executive level. Understood? Kara nodded stiffly. Daryl nodded slower. Then Marianne looked at me again. Ethan, you will maintain the completion plan and status updates. You will not be asked to certify what you cannot verify. If anyone pressures you to misrepresent controls again, report it directly to counsel. There was a pause, small but meaningful, the kind where the room understands a boundary has been placed. Daryl's jaw tightened. Kara looked down at her notes like she'd suddenly become fascinated by paper. Marianne finished with a final sentence that sounded polite, but carried teeth. I expect the Harbor Mart penalty risk to be eliminated through accurate communication and adequate resourcing, and I expect the company's culture to support truth over optics. The call ended. I stayed seated for a moment, staring at my reflection in the dark conference room window. My hands weren't shaking, but my chest felt tight, like I'd been holding my breath for weeks, and only now realized it. I walked back to my desk and saw new tasks populating the Harbor Mart board. Contractor onboarding, evidence requests, reopen. Owners assigned with names that actually existed in the system. People were moving again, not because Kara had found empathy, because governance had applied pressure where pressure belonged. That night, Legal sent the revised executive attestation, carefully worded, accurate, attached to my completion plan. Kara signed it, not me. The next morning, Priya at Harbor Mart approved the extension in writing, conditional on weekly status updates, and final evidence delivery by the revised date. The penalty exposure dropped from live to managed. We had air, but Daryl didn't, because for someone like him, losing control publicly doesn't lead to reflection. It leads to retaliation. 2 days later, my calendar populated with a new invite from HR. Subject line, role alignment discussion. Same room by the elevators, same frosted glass, same fake plant leaning like it had seen too much, and I knew exactly what was coming. They couldn't punish me through the client anymore, so they were going to punish me through my job. They thought they were about to put me back in a small room. They didn't realize the room stayed big now, and the record was already written. I didn't accept the HR invite right away, not because I was afraid, but because I knew what role alignment meant when it showed up right after an audit committee call. It meant, we can't win the facts, so we'll win the environment. At 3 o'clock, I walked into the same small conference room by the elevators. Frosted glass, stale air, the leaning fake plant. HR was there and Kara was there again, sitting slightly back like she wanted plausible deniability. HR started with a warm voice. Ethan, we want to check in on how you're feeling and talk about your future here. I sat down and kept my hands visible on the table. Calm posture, no defensive energy to feed on. My future depends on what this meeting is, I said, so let's be direct. HR slid a folder toward me. We're considering a reorganization. Your role may be rescoped. There have been concerns about how you've been communicating. Kara finally spoke. You created instability with Harbor Mart? I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I asked one question. Are you tying this to the Harbor Mart assurance escalation and my refusal to sign inaccurate statements? HR blinked. Kara looked away for half a second. Barely noticeable, but enough to tell me she understood the trap she was walking into. No, HR said quickly. This is about collaboration and alignment. Then put the reason in writing, I said, and include specifics. Dates, examples, expectations. If this is performance, document performance. If it's conduct, document conduct. HR's pen hovered. We can do that. Also, I added, still calm, if this is related to compliance reporting, I want counsel present, not because I'm threatening anyone, because it's the correct process. Kara's jaw tightened. You're making everything legal. No, I said, I'm making it accurate. HR flipped to the second page in the folder. We can offer a separation package. There it was, the real objective. Not coaching, not feedback. Removal. I looked at the page and saw the familiar corporate language. Mutual agreement, neutral reference, payment in exchange for release. I didn't touch a pen. Before we discuss terms, I said, I want to confirm something. After the audit committee call, was anyone instructed not to retaliate against employees who reported concerns? HR swallowed. Kara stared at the table like it had answers. HR said, we don't retaliate. That's not what I asked, I said. Was anyone instructed? Silence stretched long enough to feel intentional. I opened my notebook and slid 2 printed pages across the table. No drama, no flourish. One was Priya's email approving the extension pathway, time-stamped and clear that my outreach was procedural and routed through proper channels. The second was the audit committee chair's directive. Legal drafts, executive signs, no pressure to misrepresent controls. I watched HR read the second page and go slightly still. Kara's face tightened in a way that made her look older. This, I said gently, is why vague meetings don't work anymore. The record exists. If you want me gone, fine. But the reason can't be alignment the week after I refused to sign an inaccurate client attestation. HR's voice softened, but the softness was now for herself. We're trying to find a path forward that works for everyone. A path forward, I said, is either you keep me in role or you offer severance terms that reflect the reality of what happened. Kara finally looked at me, irritation and calculation fighting behind her eyes. What do you want, Ethan? I didn't say revenge. I didn't say apologies. I didn't ask them to admit guilt out loud, because I knew they never would. I said, a clean exit, a neutral reference, severance that matches my tenure, and written confirmation that my separation is not for cause. HR hesitated. That's more than standard. It's less than litigation, I said, still calm. Kara leaned back like she was done being polite. You're acting like you have leverage. I don't need to act, I said. Harbor Mart already showed you what leverage looks like. Governance already showed you what oversight looks like. I'm just asking for the only outcome that doesn't create new risk. The meeting ended the way these meetings always end when both sides know the truth has weight, with HR saying they'd review internally. 2 days later, HR emailed the terms: severance equal to several months of pay, health coverage extension, neutral reference, separation not for cause. The language was careful, but it was clean. I didn't rush to sign. I had counsel review it. Minor edits, clarifications. A sentence added that confirmed no confidentiality clause would restrict lawful reporting. Then I signed. My last week at Northbridge was quiet. No farewell email from Kara. No warm send-off, just a calendar gradually emptying out, and my access being removed in a controlled, respectful way. Because now they knew what happened when controls were treated like suggestions. On my final day, I packed a small box, nothing dramatic. A framed photo, a notebook, the badge I'd worn for years. As I walked out, I passed the glass wall of the executive wing and saw Daryl's office door open, his nameplate gone. People in the building didn't talk about it loudly. They never do. But the story traveled anyway. The board didn't announce he was removed because of a Harbor Mart attestation draft. They announced he was pursuing other opportunities. That's how companies keep their own skin intact. Still, everyone understood he tried to make a compliance obligation disappear with a signature, and the signature didn't come. A few weeks later, Priya called me, not as a friend, as a professional who remembers who told the truth when truth was inconvenient. "We're building a vendor assurance function," she said. "We need someone who understands what evidence actually is, and who doesn't fold when pressured." I asked about scope, authority, reporting line, real questions, adult questions. The role wasn't glamorous, but it was clean. Direct access to governance, clear escalation paths, a culture that treated compliance like reality, not theater. When I accepted, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt settled. Because the ending wasn't a speech or a dramatic public humiliation. It was quieter than that. They cut the headcount. They left a $1,200,000 obligation assigned. They tried to turn it into my signature, but I refused to sign what wasn't true. And in the end, the penalty didn't land on the company. It landed where it belonged, on the people who thought responsibility was something you could outsource.